10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Liftoff and the clock is starting.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And with our clothes on fire, we ride our chariots right into Kerbalcast, episode 28. Our leader, the Mockingjay.
Oh, I like you better sober.
I'm your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, and with me as always, the CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Coming up in today's program, our progress in the game. That includes pole dancing, a high-speed refueling, and orbital Legos.
And a rollie in space. DK is back with another episode of Modder's Minute with Deadly Reentry.
And your letters and the latest Kerbal news in this week's mission briefing.
Another episode of As the Kerbin Turns.
We have to say back by popular request.
Yeah.
Which, for us, amounted to one.
Yeah.
One letter was popular demand.
You know, that's all it took for me to be popular in high school. So,
well, speaking of which, have you ever heard of the do-over?
Are
you aware of the concept of the do-over?
Like when you're a kid and you roll the thing you didn't want to roll in Monopoly and your parents let you roll again?
Yeah. Or when you totally screw something up and you want a second chance.
Oh,
Pretend like it didn't happen the first time.
That's probably the easier way to explain that.
That's what I want to do. I have to apologize to you. Last week, you were asking me a bunch of questions about rendezvous, and in a very ham-fisted way, I tried to explain, and I was jumping around, and I was confusing you, and I was confusing the listenership. I knew something was up when the first letter came in. We released the last podcast into the wild, and within 24 hours, I got a letter, and it said, "Hey, Biff, instead of what you were talking about, have you considered?" And then it listed basically everything I had said or had tried to say.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, thanks. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And then along comes another letter. "Hey, Biff.
Yeah.
Why don't you try?" And then it was, and this went, and I got 4 letters like that. And I was like, but that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
So anyway, I totally messed it up. In the right stuff parlance, I screwed the pooch. But anyway, my apologies. Thanks to the letters.
I think even with the right advice,
yes,
I still wouldn't have gotten any closer.
Really? Well, that segues into the next thing, which is, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and give Nos a huge round of applause. Nos has completed his first successful rendezvous and docking. Yes.
Yeah.
And he did it just a few minutes ago, in fact.
Yeah, I did.
Before we started the podcast.
Wait, let me say this.
What?
I would not have been able to do it if it weren't for Biff's help. So even though it sounded like he didn't know what he's talking about, the thing got connected, so we're good.
And you know, you would think that this is a skill that I would need, like, for a podcast. I know how to do it.
But saying how to do it...
But articulating it...
Yeah.
That's a whole different beast, apparently. Because, I think where I was really tying myself in knots was I kept talking about being in target mode and then being in orbital mode. And I think I was jumping back and forth without clearly distinguishing between the two.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'd be saying something that was related to target, and sometimes I would say things that would be related to orbit, and I didn't make the distinction. So I think a lot of people were listening going, huh? What is he talking? What's that boy talking about? But anyway, this time what I did was I sat down with Nos. I went ahead and performed. I've got a space station that is in synchronous orbit. You know the big crater on the surface of Kerbin. You know the big meteor impact, which has got the little tiny island right in the middle. Yeah, I have got a space station that is in synchronous orbit directly above that. And it's about 100 kilometers. I'm sorry. It's 100. Oh shoot. I'm sorry.
It was like 100.
It's 2868 million meters above the surface, and that's synchronous. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, as the planet rotates, the station stays stationary above the big crater. Below that, at an orbit of, I think, what did we say, 24 24 something or other.
Yeah.
Okay. Directly below that, I had a much smaller craft, which is I built a space station in orbit, and I currently have 2 Kerbals that are stationed on it, but no escape pods. And I did this with the intent of using this as something that NOS could practice rendezvous on. Mm-hmm. The ship that is in orbit at a much lower altitude is an escape pod. And what I did was I sat down and I walked NOS through step by step how to rendezvous and dock. And as soon as I got done, I reached up and I hit F9, which put me right back to where we were. And then he and I switched seats, and then he did it. And, you tell me, you know what, rather than me put words in your mouth, tell me, I mean, what was it like for you?
Okay. So, trying to get the things linked up, trying to get them whenever I was connecting the things, I kind of didn't know exactly which things to look at.
Okay.
Because, you see all the different little tick marks for your intersects and stuff.
Okay, so you're talking about when you're like in map view.
Yeah, when you're in map view and you're looking at all the little tick marks, and two would show up, and I didn't know which one was more important than the other, and it was just 2 different times it happens. So you just try to get one of them right.
You're talking about the intersect.
Yeah, the orange and the purple one.
Yeah, okay. Or pink sometimes.
Yeah. And so what I thought, because this is, whenever I first started and I was just doing guesswork on it, I thought you're trying to get the 2 orange ones to line up or something.
Right.
And I didn't realize it was showing where each one was going to be at their intersect point. Mm-hmm. So I was messing around with those, and you were showing me like how to get it to as small a number as possible for the intersect, as far as how far apart they were. And because I could get really close orbits to each other, just messing around with maneuver nodes and stuff. I could get them real close, but I didn't know exactly how to get them to cross unless they just seriously just went almost perpendicular.
At this point I should toss in, I think, another thing that kind of confused some folks last week in the podcast. The way that I was describing how to perform a rendezvous and dock to NOS was not the optimal way. It was the easiest way.
Yeah.
And the reason I was describing it that way was I was trying to do it in such a way that he could do it step by step and eliminate as many variables as possible.
Yeah.
He will, now that he knows how to do it, NOS is going to develop a more efficient way of doing it. But
I wanted learning a simpler way like that, like builds more fundamentals.
Right.
So I was like, okay, well now I know like the fundamentals of what I need to do. Now let's find, easier ways to do that. Because remember, I used to just go straight up and then turn right and boom, orbit.
Yeah. Who else would do that?
Yeah. The only way I used to get to the MUN before is I waited till the MUN was at 90 degrees from wherever I needed it to be, and then launch straight up, and I would run into it. But now I build orbits and get them to, close in on it, and that's easier for me now, and smarter, and uses, less fuel. So I started doing that, and it's not necessarily the easiest way now, but it is way more efficient, and like easier on, the dumb variables of like hope and dumb luck works out. So yeah, getting them that close, and then figuring out, because I messed up last time because I wasn't thinking about it fully. I was talking about like how once you match its speed, how do you catch up to it?
Oh, okay.
And then I forgot it's not like a stationary object, like where if it was a stationary object and you ran toward it, and to increase your speed, you had to like run backwards some to decrease your speed.
Right.
If you're running to something, so it's like, let's say you're trying to catch up to somebody who's 10 paces ahead of you. Well, if you're running in an orbit or whatever, you increase by, where you're 2 paces closer, and then you go, slow down a little bit, but not slow down to where you go slower, you just match their speed.
Yeah.
And then increase, then match their speed. And so I was looking at it the wrong way, which, it's a different thing than you do, and I don't know of anything else where you do something like this.
Oh, we talked about this way back. Orbital mechanics are so counterintuitive because as human beings used to standing on Earth, our experience is if you want to walk from one side of the room to the other, you point yourself in that direction and go. Mm-hmm. And that's not the way it works up there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. The experience that you've just had, like I said, you just did your first successful rendezvous and dock. Was there a light bulb that went on? Was there a eureka moment where you kind of went, now I get it?
I think so. Whenever it came to matching speed and just getting it a little bit closer and a little bit closer and just inching toward it like that, I think that kind of clicked.
Okay.
What's funny is right when it came time to just go into RCS and do docking mode and just dock with the thing, I got that instantly. Yeah. Because it moves like you're strafing in a shooter or anything like that. So it's like, okay, I just need to flip back and forth.
You were having fun.
That was the fun part. Yeah. Like I was like, oh, this is fun. Like I could do this,
Yeah, because when he was when Nos was when he was lining up to where he could do his docking, he was using the escape pod that I have created is actually very, very small.
Yeah, really maneuverable.
But it is attached to a much larger tank with a much larger engine, which obviously you've got to have to increase and decrease your relative speed. Once we got to where we were within, I think, what was it, 500 meters? That's when he detached the escape pod, and from that point on, the only thing he had was the RCS, and he was in docking mode at that point. And that's when you were having fun, because then it was like, whee!
Well, it's also fun with those smaller things, because like if
they're
you
so
want
maneuverable.
Whenever I was controlling, there's the big ship. Mm-hmm. You probably saw me tapping keys like crazy, trying to get just minor adjustments. Well, I'm used to playing really reactive things like shooters and stuff. So whenever I started, I was tapping keys like crazy just to get these little minor adjustments to get it exactly how I wanted. So it was closer to the ballpark of the stuff I like to do, which is just hit buttons real fast. So,
well, you did a good job. I mean, I showed you once how to do it, and I basically laid it out step by step, and then I literally changed seats with you.
Yeah.
And then I let you do it, and you did it.
Yeah, and I don't know, with like there are different type of learners. Like there's like people who learn
they learn by reading.
Yeah, like audio learners, video learners. Like they either have to hear it or they have to or visual learners, not video learners. So they have to actually like see it happen. There's kinesthetic where you do it. I think having like retaining the information from doing it in multiple ways, like seeing you do it and then trying to do it myself and hearing instruction on doing it, like it clicks a lot faster. Yeah, because you just retain a lot more of what you experience.
I have to say though, I one thing that you said that made me laugh was when I did the first rendezvous and dock to show him how to do it.
Wait, you're talking about a long time ago?
No, I'm talking about like 30 minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
Unless we're very forgetful, in which case that was like a long time ago.
What?
No, when I did the rendezvous and dock, I reached over and I hit F9 and it reset everything back to where I started from. And I said, okay, it's your turn. And he said, but you already docked. And it was like, that's not the point.
I was like, you already did it. I don't have to do it.
It's like, just
come over to my house and rendezvous and dock for me.
Yeah.
Then I can go do the fun stuff.
Yeah. You get me close, and then I'll do the RCS.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was Nos deserves a lot of praise because he did with all I showed him once, and then he rendezvous and docked.
What's funny is the amount of stress and like you're like, oh, I hate doing this, of doing that. And the day that I put in 2 weeks' notice at my job is also the day that I rendezvous and dock.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was the other thing.
Yeah.
He did. You're going to start having more regular hours soon.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. So the job has some travel, but we're going to try to make sure Kerbalcast stays on its regularly scheduled programming. But here's to hoping. So
here's to hoping.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I hope that qualifies as a do-over. Last week, I really struggled getting it out, and we've got a couple of letters about it, which we'll get to.
That's out of context.
But what?
Nothing.
Last week, I really struggled getting it out. I know how to do it, so I'm just curious. Have you ever done it? And have you done it in solar orbit? Have you done it as it's leaving the system? I'm curious. Surely somebody else has got to have done this.
Yeah. You wanted to go into progress report?
Yeah, we can. Do you want to, in addition to your rendezvous and dock, what else have you done?
Yeah, I guess, we're mostly into my progress report anyway. So that was one of my big milestone. My other one is I was given a challenge by one of the listeners.
That's right.
Saying to put a rollie and a spinny I think it was within 4K of each other on the MUN. I don't think that was too far away, is it?
No.
So, reaction wheels sideways steer real funny. So I built this thing, and it looked like there was the rocket, and then there was just this T, this crossbar on the top. Because I was just like, oh, well, instead of putting the lander there, I'll just put a probe there that's a rollie. And this thing steered like crazy. It was like it was like a rubber sledgehammer. It was just like wobbling all over the place. I got the thing, and I didn't save once.
Right.
Landed. Done. It was like for as stupid as the thing was and how hard it was to control.
Right.
Landed perfect first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so then I just had a little bit of fuel left, so I punched it and decoupled and launched that thing. And it's I tweeted this one out. And it has wheels on the sides, to pop those out and got it spinning. And it was funny, it's the first time I ever used the brakes.
Yeah.
Because I was spinning and I couldn't stop. And it was cool because I'd ramp a hill, and I was doing tricks, like I was like jumping around, and then I'd land again because the thing had the gear wheels, so it could take a pretty decent impact. And
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah,
because I know that before your rollies would only take a certain amount of damage. Before.
Yeah, that's whenever the wheels were made out of command pods with Kerbals in them.
Yeah. That's when the rollies became the explodies.
The early days of science were harsh.
Yes.
And so, and I didn't want to spin the science on wheels.
Yeah.
But I had wheels now.
Wilbur Kerbin.
So I have that picture tweeted out. I even gave him little antenna bunny ears. And next is the spinny, which is for some reason being difficult. Weird. I've used that same ship for every MUN landing I've done, and it's worked great. For some reason, I would try to launch this one, and I didn't change anything below the very topmost decoupler. I didn't change anything below that.
Now, I'm curious, do you use the spinny to make sure you're not in a dream?
But
little Christopher Nolan humor there.
No, it does what the chest piece does. It just falls straight over.
There you go.
So I would go to launch the thing, and it would work just like all the other ones. For some reason, putting the spinny on top,
right?
The decouplers that hold it to the ground, I launched, and they just would explode the entire craft. I don't know why. I didn't change anything below the very top, and there was nothing with a weight imbalance. Made sure it was all balanced, and so I just removed them and put them back on. Worked fine. I don't know. It was really weird.
You know how you can do the alt time warp and go to 4x? Time speed?
I do now.
Okay, well, you can do that.
Yeah.
I learned the hard way that if you try and decouple while you're in 4x time warp, it's like...
Yeah.
Apparently, those little separation charges at 4x have quite the detonating power.
Yeah, it's actually 4 times the explosion power.
I guess.
So so I have the rollie up there. The spinny is now in orbit, which is a very common thing for me to end my progress reports on. There's something in orbit around the MUN,
right?
And so once I get it close, I'm gonna I haven't tried to land something near something else, but once I get it close, I'm gonna just slap that thing retrograde and close the orbit to basically a straight point downward near where it is. Okay. Is what I plan to do. Okay. And if it's not very close, the rollie's very mobile. Just account for the fact that you're doing this on the MUN, right? Rollie to your mobile.
Rollie to your mobile. There you go.
Yeah, I'm doing it on the MUN.
Okay. Remember, it's rotating, so you want to make sure that you're straight down. You want to make sure you're a little further out, because by the time you actually do come down, the ground will have rotated. Yeah. Your target will have either rotated towards you or away from you. Mm-hmm. I've made that mistake. I've been up in orbit and I've made literally a straight down descent. Yeah. I'm this is going to be perfect. And then as I go down, I just watch it just go off to the east. Yeah. Bye. So I almost landed on you.
The challenge has not been fully completed yet, but hopefully by the time of this recording hits air, it will be. So I will tweet it out whenever I have it.
Okay. So you've had 2 big accomplishments this week.
You can get a rollie on the MUN and then something about rendezvous, whatever. But I got a rollie on the MUN.
Go Nas. Nos, he's our man.
It
If he
really
can't do
seems
it-
like on these
What?
progress reports, it's in
Yes.
spurts. It's like, what'd you get done? Man, nothing.
Yeah.
What'd you get done? Man, nothing. What'd you get done? Oh, man, I went here and I went here and I did this and did this and did this. It's like, why? Because it's like you hit the top of that roller coaster.
Right.
And then you shoot down and then
Yeah.
you got to climb the hill again.
Well, that's, with especially with this game, that's kind of progress overall.
Yeah.
Which is, it's almost like you
Hit the
know,
next-
it's like you have these sharp vertical climbs and then you plateau,
Yeah.
and that's kind of where you stay for a while, and then you have this, you have these sudden leaps of progress. And in your case, you have these sudden leaps of free time.
Yeah.
Which you haven't had a lot of.
Yeah.
So
Really nice. So what has
Well-
your progress been?
I actually have a lot of progress to talk about.
We'll skip it then.
Okay, well, we'll skip it. Let's get right in. Let's get right into our next segment.
Our first letter comes from...
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Dear Biff, you idiot. That's not how you rendezvous. Love, your friend. Okay, never mind.
Dear Nos, tell Biff he's an idiot.
You're an idiot. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, progress. Last week, I had mentioned, you remember I did the aborted or the failed attempt to land on lathe.
Yeah.
Technically, I landed on lathe, but, crashed and never could get back up. And
Yeah,
so
and
I
then
F9 and went back. Okay. Well, what I ended up doing instead was I landed on Pol, which is, it is in the Joule system. It is the outermost planet, and it has very little gravity. It is a very rocky and a very hilly and a very mountainous planet. It is, it's fairly bright colored, very easy to get into orbit, very easy to deorbit. Landing got to be a little bit tricky simply because I thought I was coming down on a flat surface, but the closer I got to it, the more I realized that it was a lot more incline than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the gravity was so light that it was not difficult at all to hover my lander and continue to move further down the side of. It was a valley. One side of it was a fairly steep hill, and the other side of it was a fairly steep mountain. Mm-hmm. But I was able to coast further down to where I got to where I never got to what was a flat surface, but I got to an area where the incline was not quite as steep.
Yeah, somewhere where you could just stand.
Yeah, I did land at an angle, but if I had originally landed where I was coming down, I would have had a rollie all the way down to the bottom of the mountain. So, yeah, I did manage. I got down. I ran my science. I got my jeb got out. And the gravity, very, very light. If he jumped, he would immediately go higher than the lander itself. Mm-hmm. I used the jetpack. I went to the top of the neighboring hill and turned around and looked back. And, I mean, there was this little tiny dot way off in the distance, and that was the lander. Went back to the lander, got back in it. Went up, rendezvoused with my ship in orbit. By the time I got out of Pol orbit and back into Joule orbit, I was sucking fumes. And I had a tanker that was in orbit around Joule itself. So I went there, refueled enough to where I could get out of the Joule sphere of influence, and I got back to Kerbin, and I did it with just barely anything left in the tanks.
Nice.
It was the whole time I was thinking, I don't know if I can do this, but it worked out. I came back. My total science was, if I remember correctly, I think it was 1204. Mm-hmm. And so I immediately unlocked a lot of my tech tree. I'm almost completely done unlocking tech tree. So that was I went to Pol and back, and Pol is the very first planet in the Joule system that I've landed on.
Yeah.
I'm now shooting for lathe. I built a heavy-duty lander, which has a lot more lift and is a lot sturdier, and it also has quite a few parachutes on it. So I'm going to use Lathe's atmosphere to come in for a landing, and I've got engines that are strong enough to get me back off of it. And I've also got, instead of usually I have like 4 landing legs, I've actually got like 6. So hopefully I'm gonna, between the parachutes and the landing legs and the sturdier craft, I think I'm better suited to get delayed. Now, I told you last week that I have been playing around with modular building. This is what I call Kerbal Legos. I am building ships that have the senior docking port, or the Clampotron docking port senior.
Yeah.
I'll build it where there's one on the front and one on the back. And it's actually been very helpful because I spent quite a few hours building a very big ship in orbit. And by the time I got done with it, it looked like, from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, it looked like Discovery. It had the big drive section in the back, and then it was like long and thin, and then it, at the front was where the lander was and some other things. So it resembled somewhat Discovery, and that's what I named it. I called it Discovery. And since it was going to Joule, which in 2001, Discovery was going to Jupiter, and in Kerbal, Joule is the analog for Jupiter, I figured, yeah, this is perfect. Anyway, so I build this thing. I did, let me think about this for a minute. I did, one trip to get the drive section up there. I did 2 trips to get the next 2 sections, which are atomic rocket motors and fuel tanks. Then I did another trip to get the mobile processing lab and, it's the hitchhiker storage container, but I use it as like living quarters.
Yeah.
And then I had another trip to get the lander, up there. Okay. So, however many trips that was, I wasn't even counting. But then I did about 2 trips to refuel the thing to make sure it was full of fuel. And then I set off for Joule. And this is where my lie to the listeners comes up again. I don't know. Maybe I've gotten good at estimating interplanetary transfers. But again, I set a maneuver node. I pulled on the prograde tab, and boom, there was my Joule encounter. I have, ever since I said that I would never be able to do one that easy again, I've done it every single time. So there's a tip if you're playing the game. Go find somebody and tell them how you'll never be able to do something. Yeah. And then you'll be able to do it. Okay? So try it. Tell me how you'll never be able to rendezvous and dock.
I'm never going to find love again.
There you go.
Oh, I'm never going to rendezvous and dock.
Nas, hello? What?
Well, what are you talking about?
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, so I create a maneuver node to get me to Joule, okay? Now understand, the ship that I have built took several hours, okay? Several hours to build, several hours to fuel. I am ready to go.
Yeah.
I fire the engines, the drive section compresses everything in front of it, and it explodes. I was like, wait a minute.
Well,
so I reloaded and I fired. Eventually, what I finally discovered was I could not on the throttle. You've got the large indicators for 25%, 50%, 75%.
Yeah,
and then there's notches between them. Mm-hmm. I could not ignite I could not throttle up past the first 2 notches without the drive section compressing everything in front of it and it all exploding.
Wow.
My burn to get to Joule was about 10 or 15 minutes. I know, it was like...
Not in Kerbal time, that was years.
Yeah, I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding. So anyway, it became real obvious that the design of this thing was not working because the heavier thrust was in the back. Now, here's where the modular Legos, the Kerbal Legos, comes in. What I did was I designed a propulsion system, a drive system, that mounted on the front, okay?
Yeah.
And so, taking the ship that I already had in orbit, I sent up the new drive section. I removed the old drive section. I put the new drive section on the front. I rearranged the order of all the different modules to where the lander was on the front, the drive section was after that. Then I had 2 fuel tanks with atomic motors on them. Then I had the mobile processing unit and the hitchhiker's container.
Yeah.
Okay, so I completely redesigned
so
the
now
thing.
You're like front wheel drive.
Yeah, exactly. And that worked fine because now the strong engines were in the front, and it was pulling everything instead of pushing everything.
Yeah.
And so there I was able to actually, I was never able to get it up to full power I was able to get it up to about half power or maybe a little bit more, half throttle. But it was enough to get me to Joule within I think my burn was 4 or 5 minutes, so not too bad.
Yeah.
And I mean immediately, boom, Joule encounter. The thing is, because the drive section was in the front, the tanks were smaller, and so by the time I actually had a Joule encounter established, I was almost completely out of fuel.
Yeah.
I had some fuel left in the lander, but that was it. The ship itself was almost dry, meaning that when I got to Joule, I would not have enough fuel to actually slow me down and get captured by Joule.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so there was no way I was going to be able to, because in a situation like this, ordinarily what you would do is you would send a tanker ahead and have it waiting, and you would, you'd come in and you'd dock up with that and refuel. Well, there was no way I was going to be able to slow down enough to get to a tanker.
Yeah.
Now, this is where the high-speed refueling comes in, okay? I've got this ship. It is on its way out of the Kerbin system, okay? It is not in solar orbit yet, but it's leaving the system. Okay, I have at this point I have one of two options. I can either F9 and try and figure out how to get more fuel on this thing or something. Okay, or I can do what I did, which was I said, you know what, I am going to the middle section that had the atomic rocket motors on it. I decided I'm going to send one of those after it. So what I did was I immediately, as soon as Discovery started to leave the Kerbal system, the Kerbin system, I should say, I immediately went to the launch pad, loaded the atomic rocket tanker, and launched it right after it. And I mean, pretty much not straight off the ground.
Yeah.
But I went up and then I curved to the east, which helped me because, the Oberth effect, it actually kind of helped propel me forward. And I managed to match up escape velocity with my target.
Okay.
And this thing was, and understand now, all refueling, all rendezvous and dock, it's all high speed. Okay.
Yeah.
The one that you did was high speed.
Yeah.
But this was like really high speed. Okay. Because the speed at which you're going around Kerbin versus the speed at which you're leaving the system is considerably, there's a huge difference. And I was actually, the whole time I was thinking, I don't know if this is even possible, because in essence, you're trying to hit one bullet with another bullet.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, when I finally got close enough to target Discovery with the other ship, my relative velocity, it was moving ahead of me. I want to say it was something like 32,000 meters per second or something, some huge number. And I was able to, what I did was I aimed the ship right at Discovery and I burned. And I was able to not only match the speed, but begin to overtake it. And I actually, believe it or not, and I put pictures of this on Twitter, so yeah. I'm not making this up. But I brought the other little section, I brought the other little tanker up, and it came in and it docked right at the very back of Discovery, where there was a senior docking port, which was right on the end of the little hitchhiker's container. And it docked and it transferred enough fuel to where I could slow it down. So I was, honestly, that was exciting.
Yeah.
I know that this may sound silly, but I mean, my heart was actually racing because I was actually thinking, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
And at the speeds at which they were traveling, there wasn't a whole lot of margin for error, because you can't really, if you get too far off, it's going to take a lot to adjust. Mm-hmm. And again, I wasn't even sure it could be done. And so to do it, first of all, to come up with the idea and then actually do it.
And it worked.
It was one of those moments, you have those when you're playing games occasionally where you just do something and it's like, yes.
Yeah.
It was like, I was so excited that I did that. I was like, I cannot believe that I actually did this. Now, I tried to do it again afterwards, but by then, Discovery had actually gotten into solar orbit. And I discovered that then it's a whole different beast, because now you're not, whereas before it was on a straight line out of the system, now it's different. And by the time I launched another one, Discovery and Kerbin had both moved so far out of place as to where they were that what I ended up doing was the second tanker. I actually, right now, Discovery is on its way to a Joule encounter.
Yeah.
And then shortly after it, there's another tanker that's on its way to a Joule encounter. So when it gets there, it'll have enough fuel to stop, and there'll be a tanker that'll be coming behind it.
Yeah, to refill it.
So once I get there, I'm going to try and go down to Lathe.
Well, that's impressive.
But so far, just getting there has been exciting.
Yeah.
It got me to thinking, you know how we've talked in the past about, in the game, you can Alt F12 and there's all kinds of cheats that you can enable.
Yeah.
And we've talked about Mecjeb and the question has come up about, quote unquote, cheating in the game.
Yeah.
And I have said on many occasions that my opinion about that is it's your game. You play it how you want to play it. You play it with as many cheats turned on as you want. You play it as realistically as you want. You do whatever you want. It's your game. You play it the way that is most fun for you.
Yeah, as long as you're not cheating other people, you're not...
Exactly. There is a real sense of accomplishment because technically I could have enabled the cheats and just said, okay, I've got an empty ship
fuel,
here, and I'm going to do infinite fuel and whatever. But the fact that instead of reverting back to save or enabling a cheat or something,
found a workaround.
I found kind of this last second, skin of my teeth, hair on fire, going off the cliff 100 miles an hour kind of solution that was exciting. Anyway, has anyone else, this is a question I have, has anyone else ever done that? Have you ever done a high-speed refueling? I would be curious.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I'd never even heard of it. I'd never even thought of it until this. So I'm just curious. Have you ever done it? And, have you done it in solar orbit? Have you done it as it's leaving the system? I'm curious. Surely somebody else has got to have done this. But anyway, that was my progress for the week. And you can kind of tell by the look on my face. I'm like all excited. Like, yes.
Bunch of exciting stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I mean, immediately, as soon as I did it, it was like I was tweeting pictures going, see, I did it. So, anyway, is that our progress?
I think that's our progress. So
okay.
That's the end of progress report.
Well, let's move on now. We are so pleased to welcome back DK in this week's Modders Minute, talking about deadly reentry.
With real-life space exploration, one of the biggest challenges is not simply getting to space, it's getting back. The mod Deadly Reentry gives us a much more realistic simulation of what happens to spacecraft that are trying to re-enter the atmosphere. Deadly Reentry, or DRE, is one of the most popular difficulty mods for KSP. With it, you'll now need ablative heat shields to burn off the excess heat caused by the friction of the atmosphere on re-entry. Luckily, the mod gives the MK1 pod a built-in heat shield. If you come in too deep, you could end up burning through your heat shield while you still need it. And if you're too shallow, you might not lose enough velocity to make it back to the surface. My favorite thing with this mod is, at the very least, you end up with some more explosions on re-entry. Anything that isn't shielded will die a horrible fiery death, which is always fun to watch. If you are a KSP player who is looking for more realism with their game, I definitely recommend checking out Deadly Reentry. It's a staple, and who doesn't like some more boom booms?
Okay, I want to be the one that answers that question.
Okay.
I want more boom boom.
I don't want to put out the extra effort to see all the boom booms that would probably happen from
I just worry if we're thinking about the same thing.
Yeah.
That is DK. We are so glad to have him back. I would love Modders Minute. We know he's very busy, so when he's able to do them, we are very, very appreciative.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Let's get on to mission briefing now. It is letters, your letters, and Kerbal News, and Nos has the first letter.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
And just so you know, if anybody wrote in talking about how to do a real rendezvous, we're going to
Biff is an idiot.
We're not going to read all of everybody's letters because
Right.
a lot of it repeats, but we'll read what we can.
Okay.
So first one is Michael Z. Hey, Nos, long-time listener, first-time emailer. I was listening to episode 27, and as Biff kept talking about how to do rendezvous, I kept getting lost and confused, and I regularly do orbital rendezvous. I have orbital science and refueling stations around Kerbin, the Mun, Minmus, and had one over Duna once. If you already have figured out the rendezvous bugaboo, congratulations, but if you're still struggling, here's my advice. From what I could tell in your description, you have the concept of catching up to another orbiting craft or person down, since you said you were 2.5K from Herman Kerman. The problem I immediately saw in your story and Biff's teaching was that he never emphasized the most important part of rendezvous, zeroing out your relative velocity. If you think about the orbital route you are traveling as a highway, and Herman as a hitchhiker that you want to pick up, this will make a lot of sense. You want to pick Herman up so you don't need to slow down and match his speed of motion. This means you need to zero out your target velocity dial. You should do this when you are less than 3 kilometers from Herman. Here's a quick and simple way to do rendezvous. 1. Get an orbit. 2. Align the plane of orbit with target. 3. Line up to the side of your orbit with the target orbit. You don't want to match your whole orbit or you'll never catch it. 4. Wait for the distance of target indicators in map mode to come down to less than 3 kilometers. This may take a bunch of revolutions. If it jumps past 3K, you'll need to adjust your orbit a little either up or down. 5. Once you get the 3 kilometer or less intersection, wait until your craft is just before the target and click the velocity indicator until it reads target, then burn retrograde until it is zeroed out. For tiny adjustments, use the RCS jets H for forward, N for backwards. These and the I, J, K, L keys are super useful. 6. Now that you and your hitchhiker are stopped, point your craft at your target, pink circle, and give the craft a tiny burn up to about 10 or 20 or so meters per second relative velocity. 7. Flip your craft around to point retrograde and wait. 8. When you are about 200 meters from your target, zero out your velocity again with RCS or a burn. 9. Now you can use RCS to move yourself closer and dock or rendezvous. The important thing to remember here is when you get close, zero out your relative velocity. If you panic and can't figure out why your target is suddenly zipping away for some reason, zero out your relative velocity. Once you zero out your relative velocity, you can switch to Herman Kerman and point him at your craft and fly right over. It may help if you pretend that your craft is not moving while you're in EVA, just to give yourself a stable point of reference. Sorry for the lecture. I think I got a little carried away. Anyway, happy kerbling, Michael Z.
I want to say I have an even simpler and easier way to rendezvous and dock.
1.
You ready? 1. Okay, you have to do the counting.
Okay. 1.
Get in orbit.
2.
Rendezvous.
3.
Dock.
4.
See? That was much easier.
Oh, okay.
That was it? That was it?
No 4. There's no 4.
There is no 4. There is no spoon.
Yeah.
No. And in all fairness, I did talk about zeroing out. I just didn't talk about it well.
Yeah.
Okay, today's theme is my bad. We have a tweet, and this comes from Thomas Stroom, and he was talking about this. He says, Kerbalcast, you should use the docking port alignment indicator mod. Final approach and docking is a breeze with that one. Again, short and sweet. It was a short and sweet tweet from Thomas Sturm. And your turn?
Anthony A. Listening to your last episode and the saga of Nos and Rendezvous. Biff!
And Biff sucks.
No! You're going to drive Nos crazy. Think about this. If you have an object orbiting at 100,000 meters and another object which is within a couple of thousand meters...
Can I just say that driving Nos crazy is a very short distance?
You're trying to drive me out of crazy.
There you go.
Within a couple thousand meters, and the relative speed between the two is 0.0, their orbits are mostly identical. Really, think about it. If your relative speed is 0.0, then you're moving at the same speed as the target. Your orbit has to be identical, not exactly true, but for the purposes it is. Assuming that you made a somewhat sane approach to the target, well, it's not coming for me. Once you zero out your relative speed, you're in the exact same orbit as the target. Whenever you are doing a rendezvous, you want to maneuver in such a way that you have a close encounter, 0 to 5 kilometers. Once you get to that point, you change your nav ball to target mode and burn retrograde until speed is as close to 0 as possible.
Okay.
Thank you, Anthony A.
Yay. Okay, we have another letter, and this one is about rendezvous. So what I'm going to do is, since it covers ground that we've already covered...
You just make fart noises and say their name.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to read. This is from Take Voss, and I'm going to edit out everything about rendezvous. You ready? Hello, Nos and Biff. I love your show, and I listen to it when I'm on the bus, which is less dangerous than driving, although people look at me funny when I start laughing. Skip, 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 skip. Well, I guess this letter's a bit long. Sorry. Cheers, Take Voss.
Oh, it wasn't that long.
No, it wasn't. It was very short, actually.
But just so everyone knows, we're not being mean. There's just a lot of repeat information.
Yeah. Oh,
so
P.S.
Nothing personal.
P.S. Biff sucks.
Well, I can't disagree with that.
He didn't actually say that.
Oh, well then.
But he should.
Yeah.
He should have. My bad.
From John M. Hey, confusing Kerbal knots. I think there's a much easier way to rendezvous than Biff was describing.
Biff sucks.
1. Once you are reasonably close to your target, say under 5,000 meters, switch to target view, point yourself at the yellow retrograde marker, and burn until your relative velocity reaches 0. You are now traveling at the same speed as your target.
Biff sucks.
2. Unless I'm wrong, never. You will also have a matching orbit as your target because you are the same altitude and same speed.
Biff sucks.
3. Now you point yourself directly at your target and burn toward them. 4.
Biff sucks.
Once you get very close, 50 to 100 meters, zero out your velocity again. 5. At this point, use your finesse to maneuver your craft's standard Kerbals into a beautiful, stellar kiss, smooch, smooch, smooch.
Biff really sucks.
That comes from John M.
Biff sucks. Okay, next letter.
Quit reading my letters.
Quit reading your letters. Okay.
Those are the ones I wrote.
This one comes from Optimist Jamie. I would like to... Oh, good. This is a non-rendezvous letter. And this one's actually... Amy K., if you're listening, this one's for you. Amy K. last week sent in an audio letter where she talked about her difficulties with building landers and getting the ones that she does build not to topple over. He says, quote, I would like to weigh in regarding lander construction. If I'm going to be landing on lathe, what I do is build a space plane, dock it to a transfer vehicle, go to lathe, and once I'm there, fly to the island chain. Whilst it does not make getting back to the mothership somewhat difficult due to fuel consumption, it is preferable to what I did before I could do space planes and docking, which was basically deorbit and pray to Kraken I hit land. Also, do either of you have naming conventions for your ships? I normally go for a generic portmanteau thing like Space Hab number for orbital stations, but for bigger projects, I give them proper names based on whatever else I've got on the brain. For example, my current asteroid intercept ship is named after a character from Babylon 5. P.S. I listened to episode 27 while playing Skyrim, and I got eaten by a dragon while attempting a transfer from Whiterun to Riverwood. Today's trivia question, do you know what portmanteau means? It's not Fu Manchu.
It's if Natalie Portman had a Fu Manchu. Portmanteau.
That's exactly right. You know what? That's in the director's cut of V for Vendetta.
Oh!
They shave her head.
Everything,
and then they give her the
glue
Fu
it to her
Manchu.
face.
Yeah. She said, you tortured me.
The more you know.
You tortured me.
But
no, actually, honestly, I looked it up. Portmanteau is where you combine the meaning and the sound of the word. So, like, you get a word like smog. That's portmanteau.
Oh, okay. As far as names for ships I've done, most of them are whatever it does. So,
Rolly,
the
spinny.
one I have a build assembly called Proven Munlander. It's the Munlander that has worked time and time again.
Yep.
And then I have like Spinny 5 and Rolly 2. And then whenever I'm doing rendezvous, there's Vu 1 and Vu 2 for them to connect. Actually, I talked about
Dr.
this.
Seuss.
Yeah, whenever I was trying to do my first rendezvous attempt back in episode 5.
Numbers is hard.
Yeah, but
well, remember I said that the Compresso-matic ship that I built. Remember I called it the Discovery because that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
From 2001.
Yeah.
So as long as you don't name anything from Event Horizon, you should be in good shape. or Sunshine.
I was talking about with some friends how some things are just given the most dreadful names, and how could anything good happen? And in Warhammer, there's a planet called Armageddon. I was like, why would you name it that? No, nobody's gonna go.
Nobody's gonna name it. Well, it's like the Evil League of Evil. It's like who would name them that?
Yeah, it's like whenever the X-Men had the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Why would they form that?
Who would call them that?
Yeah, Magneto didn't think they were evil. Why didn't he call?
Okay, I have a question though.
Yeah.
When you build a ship, have you ever called it the Nostromo?
No, I don't know if I could handle the singularity that would happen when it crashes.
That would create a paradox.
Yeah. I don't have enough books on my bookshelf to solve that one. So,
did you know that there's a director's cut of Alien?
Well, yeah.
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 It's just slightly different.
Yeah.
I prefer the original, but anyway. So
okay.
Total. Well, whose turn is it? I've lost my place. I think it's your turn.
Okay, sure.
Why not?
All right, we got a new story. This is Lunar Mission 1, a new lunar mission for everyone. This is a Kickstarter, and it says, don't just follow exploration, be a part of it. We're going to use pioneering technology to drill down to a depth of at least 20 meters, 10 times deeper than has ever been drilled before, and potentially as deep as 100 meters. By doing this, we'll access lunar rock dating back up to 4.5 billion years to discover the geological composition of the moon.
This is a real thing.
Yeah, this is a Kickstarter.
This is a Kickstarter to go to the moon.
To go to the moon. The ancient relationship it shares with our planet and the effects of asteroid bombardment. Ultimately, the project will improve scientific understanding of the Earth's solar system, the formation of our planet and the moon, and conditions that initiated life on Earth. So, they are looking for 600,000 pounds.
Of what?
Pounds as in
of money.
Yeah, pounds money.
Oh, okay.
Pounds dollars.
Hey, we should ask for more explanation of British currency.
Yeah. So yeah, they have a Kickstarter going. If I remember right, if it reaches its goal by December 17th, then it's a success, and it may happen. If you pledge your money, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Kickstarter, you pledge your money, which is basically you're giving money to them to do this. Mm-hmm. And if you pledge a certain amount, you may get a reward. It is by no means a guarantee that their mission will succeed or that they'll do any of the things they say they're going to do, but it's you supporting their cause and hoping that it happens.
Okay. And send your money to Ray and Earl in their garage.
Yeah. So this was done by Lunar Missions, and they are a group out of London, and
AKA Ray and Earl Incorporated.
Yeah, you can find their website, lunarmission1.com. But yeah, they have a Kickstarter going on Kickstarter. So look up Lunar Mission 1.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Okay, so I have the next letter. From Crater. Hi, Nos and Biff. Everybody's doing that now.
Yep.
Thanks for another great episode. The best advice I can... Oh, Amy K again. The best advice I can offer to Amy K on her lander is to install Kerbal Engineer Redux or MechJeb so you can see the delta V that your craft has. Knowing that makes it much easier to plan backwards, starting with your reentry pod, heat shield, and well-protected parachute. Then add a stage with enough fuel to get you back from Mun onto a reentry trajectory. Then either increase that stage with the delta V to land or add another stage with that capacity. Then add a stage that can do the transfer to Mun, orbital insertion, and even the deorbit burn. Then finally add a stage that can make you go to space. RCS on your lander really helps, as you can use it to adjust sideways motion while keeping your legs pointed straight down. If you're falling over when landing, make sure the surface is flat and that you're not going sideways at all. To ensure that bit, go into surface velocity mode and use your RCS to put your velocity marker bang in the middle of the nav ball while you're pointed straight up. Regarding Thomas Eccles' requests for mods to make the game more realistic in episode 26, here's my suggestions. For a little more realism, you can add Ferrum Aerospace Research, which they say call it FAR
yeah.
for short. Yeah. Which makes the aerodynamics a lot more realistic, and Deadly Reentry. I heard something about that recently. Yeah, I heard something about that. Which adds re-entry effects that will heat up and maybe destroy your ship. More boom boom. For a lot more realism, you can add Realistic Solar System, which rescales everything to Earth-sized, meaning you'll need about 50% more delta V to even make orbit in the first place. This one also means that every single part in the game needs to be modified to match. So there is a realism overhaul mod that rescales parts to match real-world items and makes them more or less work with RSS. However, if you want any other mods, you'll need to also get RCSS configurations, again, Realistic Solar System. You'll need to get those configurations for them, as most of them just won't be balanced right in an RSS-scaled game. Homer to your mobile, Crater.
This one comes from Dusty. Hey guys, it's been a while since I last wrote in. If you remember, I'm the guy who forgot decouplers on my way to the moon. I hope you made it back. I've been trying to land on Minimus for a long time. Oh, he didn't make it back. Well, I've tried near a dozen different designs. My most recent attempt was the most successful. I was about to make orbit around the planet when disaster struck. Space junk from my other attempt collided with my craft. Well, that's never happened to anyone, especially nobody named Biff.
Yeah.
I blew up. I thought all was lost. However, Bill's will to live was greater than... He's just a Bill. Then the clutches of death. My design for the craft was a single engine with 5 tanks around it. Each tank with landing gear. Only one tank blew up, allowing me to continue my journey and land on the planet. Keep up the great work. Dusty.
My last letter, and then I have two stories. Mitten Poe writes in and says, "Hello, Nos and Mr. Mike Hitter."
Boom.
As always, thanks for the great show. I was wondering why you guys stopped playing the mistakes at the end of the show. Those were great. I loved it when Nos was trying to say his name over and over. Simple answer, we don't make mistakes anymore.
You probably haven't heard a single mistake in this show.
Yeah.
Because we're so good at it now.
We've gotten perfect.
And we just decided instead of putting them all at the end for you, we're just going to disperse them through the show. So
Yeah,
we're just going to make, we're just going to make mistakes the entire time.
It's just the little spice that makes everything nice.
Yeah. Maybe.
Anyway, letter from Mitten Poe. And to answer your question with this, because we're perfect.
Yeah, because we're perfect.
We're perfect.
From Whisker Fox, with regard to the theory that Kerbals are plants. I'm testing a computer at work and decided that the toughest thing I could make the computer do, without constantly messing with it, would be to have it running KSP. I have Bill, Jeb, and Bob orbiting Kerbin right now, and after observing several orbits, I noticed that they get excited when the spacecraft comes out of Kerbin's shadow. They are very stoic and businesslike when they go into the shadow.
I should point out, this is actually a two-part letter. You're reading part 1, and then part 2 is the update.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
So, they like the sun, supporting the idea that they are descended from plants. In my home game, I have landed on Mun, Minimus, Ike, Gilly, Val, Pol, and Bop. My most recent adventures have involved dramatically failing to land on Lathe. Once I rescue to the involved Kerbinaut, Urzon, I have to set up for another attempt. Hang in there, Urzon. Rescue is probably 2 years away. Update. Urzon has been rescued and was returned to Kerbin, and the Science Hall from 3 successful landings, Vol, Pol, and Bop, to the tune of 5,882 science. Update on the plant theory. It would seem that the cycle of excitement must be time-related when you have them just sitting there. A subsequent flight has them getting excited at an unrelated point, so not, as I thought at first, at the result of a sunrise. But
I still say, if they're plants, why do they have teeth? Seriously.
Venus flytraps have teeth.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. I would not discount the sun theory. I think that they figured out they were being watched, and it was like Jeb nudged Bill and said, "Hey, shh, come on. Put on a stoic face."
Yeah.
I know you're excited that the sun's coming up, but be stoic. Okay, moving on now. This is actually something that we had gotten a letter about this 2 weeks ago, and it got lost in the shuffle. So I am bringing it to the forefront here. We have a listener by the name of Andrew Mason who has decided to keep a blog of his progress within Kerbal. And it is on BoardGameGeek.com.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of which Nos is a aficionado.
Yeah, I'm on there a lot.
The blog is called My Kerbal Space Program, and I'm going to read just a short entry. The headline, the title on this is "Occasionally Things Go Right." Eventually, I built a rocket to go around the Mun and come back again. I got up close to the Mun and then remembered a conversation from the podcast about landing on the rocket engine. Having remembered to F5 before I gave it a go, it was messy. The rocket survived the impact, but tumbled and knocked the parachute off. This has happened so many times. So I thought, I can do this. I hit F9 and tried again, landing legs deployed just in case, and this time managed to land successfully. After having a wander around the Mun, I took off and managed to escape the Mun's influence and then ran out of fuel. So I had a big egg-shaped orbit and no fuel. And if you want to find out how he manages to get back to Kerbin, which he does, and successfully land with the same craft, you have to go read his blog for the rest of the story. Again, it is Board Game Geek, Andrew Mason, and it's called My Kerbal Space Program.
See, I can look at his profile and see what games he plays and silently judge him from afar.
I'm silently judging you because I'm just a little bit superior to thee.
Yeah.
What do you have?
This one is from Misha.
Okay. You weren't sure about that.
Buckle up. We're in for quite a letter. Hey, Biff and Nos. Hey, you're back in front. Just a couple of quick tips. I'm sure everybody has inundated you with them already. But anyway, Amy K's Mooner Landers. Landers.
Everybody likes Amy.
Yeah.
That's, you know what? That's the name of a failed BBC show. Everybody Loves Amy.
Great story, but I don't buy the localized wins on the Mun bit. What is far more likely is that she hasn't killed all of her horizontal velocity before touchdown, or she's landing on a slope, but that would be kind of obvious and she would have caught it. In the former case, she should make sure that her nav ball is in the surface mode during final approach. Then all she needs to do is keep her retrograde marker on the top of the nav ball for a perfectly vertical landing. You also don't need much to land on the Mun and return to Kerbin. My lander carries quite a bit of kit, yet only has a small fuel tank and a Rokomax 48-7S engine. Tons of fuel for landing, launching, and emergency rendezvous with a failed satellite, as well as the return to Kerbin. The trick is to use the last bit of fuel in the transfer stage to initiate the landing. Use it to kill most of the orbital velocity, but then ditch it for the final approach. Oh, and finally, the parachute thing? Yeah, it happens to me on occasion too. Sometimes the parachute gets staged in space and it still looks like it's packed. Sometimes when you switch from or to a spacecraft, there will be a sound of wind, dead giveaway that the parachute is deployed. Simply EVA and repack it. NOS's Lunar Landing Challenge. Continuing landing tricks from above, here's one I would use to land close to another object. Only works on planets and moons with no atmosphere. 1. Enter an orbit which goes above whatever it is you're trying to land near. 2. Slow down until your orbit arcs over the object but intersects some distance behind it. 3. Orbit a maneuver node directly above the object and pull the retrograde until the orbit goes vertical. It may go a bit wonky. This gives you the time needed to slow down over the object. 4. Perform a vertical descent quite nicely, just like Amy K should be doing. You should land practically on top of the object. He has some excerpts about rendezvous, but we're going to go into Biff's crash lander. You obviously didn't do your research as regards required to thrust to land on launch from Elu. Or was it lathe?
Yeah, it was lathe.
Anyway, as well as the wiki and calculating that for yourself, I can highly recommend a mod called Kerbal Engineering Redux. It gives you tons of info while building and flying your ships. You can get an idea of how much delta V each stage has, but most importantly, for your case in point, it can tell you if your stage has enough thrust to launch from a given planet. Basically, you need your thrust-to-weight ratio to be above 1, probably at least 1.5. You'll also want to make sure you have enough delta V to reach orbit. Hope this helps, and wish I had time to play these days. Homer to your mobile, Misha.
Yay! You know, that's good advice, and I didn't do the Kerbal Engineer Redux, but when I decided that I was going to make another run at lathe, this time I actually spent some time on the wiki.
Yeah.
And that's what made me choose because I already had a ship, a lander and a ship. I already had it in the Joule system. And so I went to the wiki, and that's how I chose Pol, because this lander will work well on Pol and get back. And so that's how I chose that. And then I was looking at the wiki, and that's what kind of led me to build the heavy lander. Okay, very last item we have. This comes from PC World India. PC World India. And the title is Buyer Beware. 3 out of 4 Steam early access games haven't been finished. Steam's early access model is a great way to support small game developers and fresh ideas, as long as you don't expect to play the finished product anytime soon. According to analyst Patrick Walker, only 25% of early access games on Valve's Steam gaming service have graduated to full game status since the program launched in March 2013. Although a glut of recent early access launches have skewed the numbers downward, even last year's games stand at just 42% finished. An unfinished early access game isn't necessarily a bad thing. For example, Kerbal Space Program and DayZ have become hits despite having no final release date in sight. But those are just the ideal scenarios where lots of sustained interest can fund lengthy development cycles. In other cases, players can become stranded as funding dries up and developers lose interest in chasing bad investments. Again, that story, and that's an excerpt. That's not the whole thing. But that's from PC World India. I would like to chime in.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this literally, Squad, okay? Because I don't want you to stop. But seriously, if Squad were to stop with the game as is, I would still be playing it.
Yeah, I mean, you've gotten your money's worth out of it, that's for sure.
Yeah. I'm actually, when I last looked, I was at 930-something hours.
Yeah.
I bought the game when it first went on the big sale, and I don't remember what I paid. I think it was like $16. I am sure that my per hour rate is now down to pennies.
Yeah.
For the amount of playtime I've gotten out of this game, I'm not encouraging Squad to stop. I know that they have an end in sight.
Yeah.
But the game as is very enjoyable. I look forward to whatever else you do. But I have most definitely gotten my money's worth out of it. So
it's really interesting because you see something like Steam Greenlight or like earlier we referenced Kickstarter.
Right.
And I back a lot of Kickstarter board games and stuff. And so it's a new thing for consumers because usually you buy finished products.
Right.
Now you're buying into something that isn't done yet.
Right.
And so there's a Kickstarter for a board game I backed, and it's over a year now since I put my money toward it.
Right.
And it still isn't done. And a lot of people are like real upset, and it's like, well, if it wouldn't have gotten the money from you, it would have never happened, period. And if they're updating and they're actually going to give it to you, it just means it hasn't happened yet. And so there's like, well, I gave you money to do this project that I wouldn't have known about before, but I expect it in a timely manner based off of things I've never had to experience before. Because, for instance, my game is in development, and it doesn't happen instantly. Like, there's a lot of work involved. And so it would be like me pitching you the game and then you saying, yeah, I want to buy that. I'm like, okay, well, give me the money now to help me make it. And as time goes on, it'll come out. You're like, why isn't it out yet? It's like, well, these things take time.
Right.
It's a new consumer kind of thing where you're paying for something that isn't done yet.
It's like paying somebody to write a book.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's
write faster.
You're paying for your chickens before they hatch,
right?
And some of them are going to, and some of them aren't. But yeah, it's definitely different. But you incur that risk whenever you do it. Like every Steam game that I bought on Greenlight, I have come to terms with. Some of them may never finish,
right.
So I need to like and appreciate what they are now because I may not get more.
It strikes me that this is something that is only possible now.
Yeah.
I think that prior to, for lack of a better expression, I'll call it the software age. Prior to the software age, when you bought something that was finished. Whatever was on the shelf.
Yeah, you can only buy complete goods.
Yeah. Whatever was on the shelf was it.
Yeah.
I mean, until they came out with the, super whooper duper edition of whatever it was, what you bought was what you bought.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was that joke going around for the longest time that if cars were made like Microsoft does Windows, it's like you'd get it and there wouldn't be any doors on it. And,
yeah.
And, if you, pulled the windshield wiper, the headlights would go on and, and the various bug fixes and things that would be, we really have transitioned from being used to products that are finished when we get them to products that are literally in progress when we get them.
Yeah. Now,
I can't tell you the number of times I've bought a video game, plopped it in my 360, and then sat there for an hour and watched it download patch after patch after patch on release date.
Yeah. So it would have been held back more if they were not going to release it unless it was fully completed, or they would have released it with bugs. So it's this weird thing where it's like, well, if you want this thing now, it's going to have some problems, but you can have it now and we can update it as it goes. But if you want it completed good, then you're going to have to wait a very long time and you may never know about it. And if you know that you're doing that, I think it's fine. If you buy a Greenlight game, you can't complain about it. It's like, well, they're not finishing it. It's like, well, you paid for what it currently was at with the hopes that it'll finish. Or if you fund a Kickstarter and it doesn't come through, like I had one and I gave them the money so they can complete their goal and there was a certain reward I was going to get and I never got it.
Right.
And I never will. And I'm okay with that because that's the risk I incurred whenever I gave the guy the money. But
which, again, I think that 20 years ago
would not have been that attitude.
Yeah, you would not have that attitude.
Yeah.
20 years ago. I mean, the only thing I say is please don't ever make refrigerators like that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine buying a refrigerator like, door will be added later in a future update?
So there are some things that like a completed game, like a completed console game, and it needs updates to even work. But those updates are things that you would get after it's shipped out. I don't agree with that too much because you weren't agreeing to buy an incomplete game.
Yeah.
Like,
No, that's true.
incomplete game. But
Well, did you have anything else?
nope, that's it.
Okay, well, that does it for Mission Briefing, and you know what that means. And now, another edition of As the Kerbin Turns.
Honey, I'm home.
Hello, dear. How was your day?
Oh, same as always. I went to a planet that was close to a black hole, and it took me a few hours to get away from it. Say, who keeps knocking books off the shelf? And why do you look 23 years older?
Tune in next time for another edition of As the Kerbin Turns. All right.
Hey, yeah, woo!
It's back.
Yeah.
And it'll be gone again next week.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe.
Just don't count on it anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you know what? It's like after the credits. When we have something, we'll do it.
Yeah. When we don't
have something, we won't do it.
Yep.
Speaking of things that we don't have, Shay has been doing challenges for us for quite some time, and they have always been very creative and very enjoyable.
Yeah.
But his schedule has gotten to where he can no longer do that. So unfortunately, we're having to say goodbye to the Shay Challenge.
Yeah.
Which we barely knew him.
Yeah.
But I will do this just in case there's a little bit of, like Shay Challenge withdrawal. I would like to toss out 2 challenges. Okay?
Okay.
These are the Biff challenges. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Number 1.
Explain rendezvous.
Very good. Nos gets a point. Okay, no. Number 1 challenge. Try and do a high-speed refueling like I did. I am curious, again, if anyone's done this, and for those of you that have not, give it a try.
Yeah.
And the other challenge that I will toss out, put a space station or something, a satellite, a ship, or something, put it in synchronous orbit around Kerbin, okay? Bonus points if you put 2 items in synchronous orbit directly across from each other, like one at the apoapsis and one at the periapsis. Even more bonus points if you put 4 at each point of the compass. So there you go. Those are the Biff challenges. Not as good as the Shay challenges.
For the first one, whoever tweets out like a picture of the highest speed.
Good. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Highest speed refueling. We'll give him a shout out.
Okay. Whoever is the quickest, that's a good one. I didn't even think of that. Okay. The timer is running on this. First person to tweet out a picture wins the challenge.
Yeah.
And you know what that means? That means I will come to your house.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going to the Kerbal.
No, I will come to your house and I will explain rendezvous to you.
It's time to sit by the fire.
No, wait a minute. That would be for everyone else. That would be for those who lose the challenge. For those who win,
all right,
I
kiddos,
won't come to your house.
It's time to sit around the fire and listen to Grandpa Biff explain rendezvous.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess that wraps up Kerbalcast episode 28.
You sure you don't want to talk rendezvous?
The Mockingjay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We want to give out some thanks. First off, thanks to our listeners.
Yeah.
Everybody that listens. We really wouldn't have much of a reason to do it if it weren't for you guys.
That's true. It'd be just the 2 of us sitting in a room talking to each other.
Yeah, and I don't want to
not recording it.
And I don't want to do that. So, and we also want to thank all of our regular contributors.
Now the truth comes out.
Yep.
And we want to give out thanks to the subreddit moderators at Kerbal Space Program and Kerbal Academy. They've got a link to our podcast on their front page. And as always, if you want to know what's going on in the Kerbal community, go to the Kerbal Space Program subreddit. If you're looking for good advice, Kerbal Academy is a fun read as well.
And all the music you've heard is by Professor Soap. You can find him at facebook.com/Professor Soap.
And a big thank you to the folks without whom none of this would be possible. Squad!
If you'd like to contact us, write us letters, or give us audio letters that we can play on air.
Yes.
You can find us and contact us through kerbalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Kerbalcast.
And you can download episodes directly from our website, kerbalpodcast.libsyn.com. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do that, every time we put out a new episode, it automatically updates for you. And thanks to Ascalon, you can now find us on YouTube, where you can read us instead of listen to us, and you can learn what things like Homer to your mobile mean. So, Well, that wraps it up for today's edition of Kerbalcast episode 28. I am your LMP, Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, CMP Command Module Pilot
Nostromo.
Until next time, happy Kerbaling!